Welcome to episode 92 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven health.com/92.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey all, it's your host Chris Sandel here, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Real Health Radio. Today it's another guest interview where I'm chatting with someone, and that someone is Tina Muir. So Tina is a 2-hour 36 marathoner and Great Britain runner who recently shocked the running world by taking a hiatus to focus on starting a family and overcoming amenorrhea. Tina has also created the Running for Real community to foster a healthy mindset around running, and this is a space where runners can explore, embrace, and get better from setbacks through inspiring podcasts, videos, and blog posts, and most importantly, sharing their thoughts and experiences. So Tina is someone who I've really only recently discovered, and it was because of her decision to quit running. So she is a member of the No Period Now What Facebook group that I'm a member of, and I saw a video that she posted in there linking to her own page. And I recently released a podcast all about exercise and fitness. If you haven't listened to that, then I would check it out. You can find it at seven-health.com/90. But it was while I was writing that episode that I came across Tina and her story. And I wanted to also do a podcast all about overtraining and looking at this from the physical perspective, so what happens within the body, but also from a psychological perspective, so looking at things like exercise addiction and exercise compulsion. So Tina, when I saw her and her story, thought would be perfect for the first part of this, so looking at the physical manifestations of overtraining, or at least some of them. And I've also recorded another podcast with another guest touching on the second part of this, so exercise addiction, and that will be released in the next month or so. And I'll probably do another solo episode on this topic myself, but anyway, getting back to the podcast at hand, this show with Tina, it's mostly about her recent decision to quit running, and the reason for this, which is in large part because she's been experiencing amenorrhea for the last 9 years. So in layman's terms, that means she hasn't had a period in over 9 years. So we talk about her decision to quit and what it was like leading up to this point. We talk about the reaction, so both the reaction from others, but also within herself. And when running has been such a huge part of your life, or has been your life in some senses, running can be part of your identity. So we speak about this aspect. We chat about our mutual friend in Dr. Nicola Rinaldi and how her book was a big part in helping Tina to make the decision to have some time off and to make getting her period back her main focus. And we also chat about what her life looks like now that she's not running an obscene amount of miles each and every week. And a big part of why I reached out to Tina was because she is very down to earth and is very open about her life. And reading her blog and seeing her videos, she just comes across as a real human being. And I'm glad to say that I was left with that same impression once I finished up chatting with her. And one more thing before we get started on this. When I did finish up chatting with Tina, she informed me that she had recorded her own long interview with Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, and it's going to be released the day after this one gets released. So that'll be on Friday the 19th. So if you're interested in the topic and what we cover in this show, then I recommend checking that out. Once it's up, I will add that to the notes in the show notes, but you should be able to find it yourself if you go to tinamuir.com and then click on the podcast tab. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Here is my interview with Tina Muir. Hey Tina, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
So you are someone I've recently discovered. So often guests that I have on this show, I've been following for years, but in your case, I found out about you a couple of weeks ago and have been really just going back through your blog and your Facebook page and reading about as much as I can in preparation for this chat. So I guess to start with, are you able to tell the listeners a bit about your background, who you are, what you do or what you did, and then we can chat about your recent announcement and how I found out about you.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. And it's funny, actually, you're in a similar situation to most people I've been talking to lately, aren't people I knew before. And it's just, it's been a bit of a whirlwind seeing all these, articles and interviews coming up because, I felt like I was doing my best to get out there before, but I guess I wasn't. But yeah, so I guess my background is that I am a former professional runner. I started running around age 14, and although I took it very slowly during my school years because I wanted to be safe, I didn't want to end up burned out, and I thankfully had a coach who wanted the same thing. But I continued to rise up through the ranks until I was good enough. I finished 16th in England, which allowed me to be kind of recruited for an American university, or multiple American universities. And, I picked one and went to the US for 5 years for my bachelor's degree, all while focusing on my running. And it was, it became pretty much the main thing in my life that I was focusing on and, doing everything I could to be the best I could be. And then once I finished my university degree, I went on to do a master's. But at this point, I decided I wanted to go after a professional running career and really see what I could do. I'd always had this lifelong goal of running for Great Britain in a world championship. That was always my number one goal, and I knew I still wanted to do it. And so I continued to train, and thankfully Saucony helped me along the way by sponsoring me. And I had some other great companies who kind of supported me and gave me resources to pursue those dreams. And in April 2016, I accomplished that goal. I ran for Great Britain in the World Half Marathon Championships and then ran for them again in the European Championships a few months later. So I really accomplished that goal, and it was an incredible feeling after 12 years of really putting in the hard work. But then I noticed that my passion and kind of drive was slowly dropping, and I was finding it hard to keep motivated. And suddenly, around 7 weeks ago, something inside of me snapped, and I said, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to stop. And there was a primary reason behind that. That's something that had been in the back of my mind for years and years, but I'd pushed it out. But I finally decided to listen to it. But I guess you're going to ask me about that in a minute. So yeah, that's pretty much the background of the running aspect of it. Okay.
And you said that when you started running, that you wanted to build up slowly and you wanted to have a long career. Even at the beginning, did you recognize that you were quite good, or did others recognize in you that you had a real innate ability to run?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. I mean, I don't remember specifically thinking, oh, I'm good at running, or, I'm going to do something big. I think it was one of those situations where I kind of moved my way up the cross country class in PE and thought, oh, actually, I'm okay at this. I'm near the front. And from there, it kind of sparked a competitiveness in me, not so much for the running aspect of it initially, but just to be one of the best. And so then once I joined a club, then people started to say, yeah, you've got something, you've got it, whatever that meant.
Okay. And was it, what distances were you running? Was it always, I got the impression that you were a marathon runner, but were you then doing other like half marathons? Was that really common as well?
Well, I only started half marathons and marathons at age, what would that have been, 22, once I graduated from university. Before that, it was all lower distance. In school, it was 800 meters, 1,500 meters, 3,000 meters. And then in university, it was 5,000 and 10,000 meters. And then, once I finished university, I kind of moved on to half marathon and then eventually marathons.
Is that normally the way that it works? Just because I don't know a huge amount about running. I've done a lot of running myself, but I don't follow the sport very avidly. But I always got the impression that for the shorter distances, it was a different style of runner to then someone who's then going to end up doing the marathon.
Yeah, I mean, I think people come at running from different kind of backgrounds, there are a lot of people out there who do it in a similar way to me. You start in school, you continue to, move up in distance over years, you get better, and you either find a distance along the way that seems to suit you, like a 5K or a 10K, or you continue to go up and, people may move to the marathon. And then if people still feel like they'll do even better with longer, they might move to ultra marathon. So you do kind of move up. Generally, most people tend to move up over the years as their speed kind of disappears as they get older and we lose that like snap in our legs.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of people who kind of come at it from a different angle who, just pick it up at age 30 and they think, oh, actually, I'm pretty good at this. And they work their way up. So there are a lot of people in the running world that actually start in a non-traditional sense. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't want to be burned out and neither did my coach. But a lot of teenage runners are pushed way too hard. And I hear it all the time. People will come up to me and say, oh, my son or daughter ran a mile in this time and they're 12 years old. What training should they be doing? And I'm like, don't train them, just let them have fun, because those kids that do get pushed too hard too early are usually the ones that get to age 19 when the university life is in full swing and they say, you know what,
Yeah.
This isn't for me. So it's usually one of two ways. If you weren't pushed too hard, you kind of keep moving up in distance, or you come at it, just say, oh, I want to try a marathon, and you skip all the underside of the lower stuff.
And you mentioned you're living out in the US. Do you notice a difference between the US culture versus the culture in the UK around that kind of, whether it be pushiness or how hard people are pushed to train?
Not so much in that sense. I see both sides, both places and other places I've seen around the world where parents get a bit too enthusiastic and coaches and push the children too hard, leaving burnout. But I would say that the biggest difference is during university. In the US, the university system is very intense.
Okay.
I remember finishing university and being just completely wiped out emotionally. I was so exhausted. You race so often and it's so intense that I just felt I needed some time off, and I did take some time off. But the system in the UK is a bit more kind of hobbyish. So
Yeah.
You go to a club in the evening, you run with the club, and you're still going to train very hard, but it's in the US, it's almost like being in school. And this is one of the classes you have to take. Like, you have to be at this time at this hour. If you're not there, you have to explain where you were and why you weren't there. And so it's kind of almost like being a little bit of a child, which is great. It keeps you accountable, and you have so many more resources in the US, which is I absolutely loved. But I would say a lot more people kind of drop off after university over here, whereas in the UK, there's very little drop off between university and the rest of your life.
Okay. So let's then talk about the recent announcement. You obviously alluded earlier on that you have now stopped running for the last 6 or 7 weeks. But do you want to explain a little bit more about that and what was possibly more of the driving impetus behind the decision?
Yeah, so like I said, 7 weeks ago, I made the decision to stop running. But as I mentioned, there had been something in the back of my mind, and it'd been in there for years, in that I hadn't had a natural period in 9 years. And people have said to me a lot now, oh, why didn't you ask about it? And I did. Every time I would go to the doctors, they would ask me, what was the date of your last period? And I would be like, I don't know. And then I would kind of push them for a little bit, say, what should I do? What can I do? And it would always just be written off to, well, it's just the running. Just, when you stop running, it will come back. And at the time, whenever they said that, I was young in my 20s and I was thinking, what do you mean stop running? I'm not going to stop running. Who do you think I am?
Yeah.
And, I just kind of brushed it off. But then the way they were so like blasé about it, I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm obviously not doing any harm. And they would reassure me with that, saying, you're not really doing any long-term damage. It's just, it's just the training. And I thought, okay. And I knew other people were getting their cycles. So I was a little bit ashamed of it. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I know I eat well. I know I look after myself. So why is my body like broken, essentially? And I was embarrassed to talk about it. So about a year ago, after I achieved that goal, like I said, I noticed my motivation went down a bit. And my husband said that the biggest thing he noticed was that I was able to override my competitive switch, which I think that should make sense to most people. Kind of before, I could really run myself into the ground, push so hard that I pretty much fell over the finish line and would just be crawling along the floor. But after that time in the last year, I noticed that in that tough part of a race, I kind of shut down a little bit and just kind of cruised it in. And then my sister had a baby. That was definitely a driving force to remind me of, if I don't have a period, I cannot have a child. And so I actually got to see the physical manifestation of what I was not able to do. And it was just a health thing. About a year ago, I decided that I wanted to focus on my health. I started changing my diet. I started, doing acupuncture, trying to relax, trying to sleep better and look after myself. And I knew that, having a monthly cycle is such a natural thing for a woman to have, that as much as doctors said, oh, it's fine, I knew something deep down had to be wrong if I could go 9 years without having anything.
Okay. And it was interesting when I read back through your blog piece or blog posts, and it's like, I obviously have the benefit of knowing your decision now and knowing the reason, but when I would read back even like to the middle of last year, there was just a bit of an uneasiness within you in terms of your training and running, and it felt that I don't know, that you were kind of needing to make that change, and it had been there for a little while.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny. It's like you've read the final chapter of the book,
yes.
and now you're going back to the middle. It was like that, and I could feel that at the time. Like you said, it wasn't unease. It was a something isn't right here kind of feeling. But I was too afraid. This had been my life for 14 years of train, race, rest, over and over and over again. And I was fortunate enough to never really have an injury that kind of stopped me. I strained my calf once, but I slipped on snow. So that wasn't even, an injury that happened over time. It was just a 1 second slipping on snow. But other than that, I hadn't needed more than 2 weeks off. And even during that time, I cross-trained very hard for that 4 weeks off. And so I'd never had an injury that stopped me. And so it never really gave me that opportunity to think about it. And, you hear over and over again that if you're not having a monthly cycle, that is bad for your bone health. You'll keep getting stress fractures. If you're not eating enough, that's bad for your bone health. You'll get stress fractures. But I never had any of that. So I knew that my bones were okay. I'd even had bone density tests and everything was fine. So I didn't have anything that was really enough to pull me back during that time. But yeah, in that last year, it really started to, I think, eat away at me, knowing that I had to do something about it. And having achieved that big goal, it kind of removed the drive, I guess, to continue to push that thought out of my head. And
what's the response been like since sharing the news?
Absolutely amazing. It was kind of surreal having, People magazine reach out to me and, Well and Good, and all these websites, Runner's World, I guess I kind of could expected that being in the running world.
Yeah.
But the others, getting national exposure and people coming up to me saying, oh, my friend who's not a runner mentioned this to me about you. And, it's amazing how it's kind of taken off, and it's been very positive. I mean, obviously there are the immature people who are saying, why do I need to know about that? Why should I care? But for the most part, people are being very, I guess, supportive and saying, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. I had no idea. Or other women, I've had thousands of other women reach out to me and say, thank you. I thought I was the only one and I thought I was broken. And there's been, probably close to 100 women who have said, you know what, I think I need to take the same step. And I'm not encouraging everyone to stop running by any means or stop exercising, but it has been amazing to know that these women were having that same fear that I was and feeling like something was wrong with them, and that I can help them to get the right resources to know what to do.
And I think, if I'm remembering something you either said in a video, in one of the posts, you said that you were maybe worried about admitting this because the fear that people would then think you had an eating disorder. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the I guess the main reason that I didn't say anything. I've always prided myself on being honest, and if you have been reading through my blog, you will see that.
Definitely.
Even before a year ago, I was always very honest. When I had a bad day, I would tell people, I had a bad day. I'm a professional runner, and I really struggled today. I doubted myself and everything, but I felt like I was being so deceptive because I wasn't telling people this hidden side of me, that I felt like I was hiding a lie, and everything about me was a lie. But it was because, the association, I guess, before this time was that if you don't have a period, you're not eating enough. End of story. And I'd always kind of been fearful of this stereotype that kind of came along with it, saying if you have amenorrhea, you have an eating disorder because you're not eating enough. And I had always made sure I was eating enough. I always that was something I love to eat. I love to get good foods in, but I also love my unhealthy foods. So it wasn't even like a case of, I guess, orthorexia or kind of obsessed with clean eating. I really did pride myself on having a good balanced diet. And I, had mentioned my amenorrhea to a few people over the years, and they always jumped to the conclusion, well, you need to eat more. And so it was, I was very fearful of that. And that stigma is still there, but I think it's slowly starting to lift as people are seeing there are other factors in it. And I know you've talked to Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, and she's been, so helpful in this process for me. But she kind of opened my eyes that it isn't just about the calorie deficit, I guess, but obviously that does play a part. But it was also things like, even discovering that women who were severely obese but had lost, 15 pounds very quickly, they could lose their cycles. It wasn't just the one factor. It was very nice to know that I wasn't alone, but I kind of wish I had gone about it a bit earlier and not been so scared to say anything.
And how does it now feel that you've been able to reveal this? Like, does it feel like there's this weight's been lifted, or are you still struggling?
Yes, it definitely feels like a giant weight has been lifted, and I can finally say that I can reveal that secret. And like I said, I like being honest, but then also knowing that other people, I'm helping them with the same thing. It's so rewarding, and it makes it all worthwhile. And of course there are moments where I get doubt, or I get people say a negative remark or two, and we as people tend to always stick on the negative ones rather than the positive, but knowing that I could say it and just be vulnerable and be myself is definitely worth the kind of few negative things that have come of it.
And what about the identity piece? Because I guess someone like yourself, and this is what I'm imagining, who's dedicated so much of their life to this sport, probably identifies as being a runner or even a competitive runner. So has it been difficult in those terms because you're now stepping away from that and there's a sense of like, who am I without this?
Do you know, going into it, when I was preparing to kind of publicize it, because I'd stopped running 2 weeks before I actually announced it to the world. And I knew once I announced it, that was it. There was no going back. And so I took that 2 weeks to really think about it and make sure I was doing the right thing. And in that time, I was terrified. I was talking to all my friends and family and trying to say to them, like, I don't know who I am. Like, what am I going to be? Like, what if people don't respect me anymore? What if, and basically talking about that identity thing, I feared it. But then once it actually came out, I actually felt so much relief, and the amount of support I had from people saying, you know what, running is just something you do. It's not who you are. We don't care about you because of who you are, because of what you do. We care about you because of who you are. And hearing people who weren't, close family and friends who had known me for, 20 years, say that meant so much, because it was like, wow, actually, maybe I am like a nice person underneath. and so that made it so much better. And I'm not going to lie, there has been moments where I've seen other elite runners, accomplish something and thought, wow, I'm so jealous. I wish I could have done that. Or, I've seen, I guess, not being able to say that elite runner thing. I was fearful of it at first, that people would, just say, oh, she's not really done much, or, oh, she's a has-been kind of thing. But actually, quite a few people have reminded me that it's still I still have the times next to my name, and those are forever mine. So it doesn't really, mean anything. And actually, I feel like I've become a bit of a better mentor and better person for giving advice because I've been there. But now I can actually step back and give a bit more of a rounded view on things, rather than being right in it, where my mind was so foggy from all the training, and I've realized how exhausted I actually was in every aspect of my life. I'm not surprised that I'm surprised I didn't kind of burn out emotionally because of all the stuff I had on my plate in addition to the running.
Yeah. And even reading through your blog, I don't get this very one-dimensional picture of you of just being a runner. You really have all of these other characteristics that come through, and that so I know it doesn't necessarily make it easier because you can still identify with one thing. But yeah, when I read through, you seem to have a very full life. You seem to have other passions and interests, and even stuff within running that you can be doing even if you're not participating yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's taken some time to learn that, but yeah, I'm feeling more confident in that right now. And I think I've realized, and for anyone else listening, that there's so many, even if you do think, running is who I am, I can't not do it, I use it for stress relief, there's all these things. But as I step back, I've realized that having that fear meant that I was too attached to running as it was. It was too much a part of my identity. And, there's so many other things that can bring joy to someone's life. And you just have to kind of open your eyes and look for it, and follow that joy rather than, thinking, oh, I have to do this because I'm so used to it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that when you've gone and seen doctors, you'd mentioned it before about the amenorrhea. I also got a bit of an impression with reading that you started to ramp up the investigation into it, so maybe seeing other physicians or other nutritionists. Am I getting that impression correct?
Yes, definitely. Again, it was about that 1 year time. It was actually, I was interviewing, I don't know if you know Tawny Prazak of Endurance Planet.
I don't.
It's another podcast, very good podcast. And I was interviewing her, and she's very well known, in the running world and the endurance world. And she was talking about her experience of how she had been training for triathlons. She was pretty much in the same boat as I was, training for triathlons, professional triathlon, and had kind of realized that, her health was more important and than her training. And hearing her describe her life and how she'd reached a burnout point, I felt like she was describing my life. Okay. And it kind of scared me. So I think that put an initial kind of that kick-started the engine of me going down this path of kind of discovering. And then, I started to push for more specialists. I went to see, I saw nutritionists. I spoke to consultants. I went to a sleep therapist to get my insomnia taken care of. I went to an endocrinologist. I really started to push down every avenue. I increased my fat intake to ramped it up to try and see if that would help. And I basically tried everything I could possibly try, knowing that if I tried all that and it still didn't work and running was the only thing I could remove, then hopefully once I removed the running, everything else would be in place and it would be less of a stressful experience rather than trying to change everything at once. So I figured that if I started doing it bit by bit, then it would make it easier when the transition time came, which I guess was right looking back.
Okay. And you mentioned you're on another podcast and someone else was talking about their experience with this. Do you think this is really common either in the running world or in the just competitive endurance sport world?
I don't even think it's just in the competitive world. I think it's just very common in general. I mean, I've had so many of the women that have reached out to me have said, I'm not an elite runner, I'm not a professional runner, I'm not even a competitive runner, but I've had this. And, I think it is far more common than we realize. And Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, she had mentioned that anything really more than one missed cycle, you should be kind of checking out to see if something's going on, because the longer you leave it, the worse it's going to be. And I think it's such a taboo topic that a lot of women just think, oh, I'll figure it out. And usually it might come back, might just be a few months and it does come back. But in my case and many other cases, it's kind of a situation where it goes away and you think, oh, I'll take care of that in a few months' time if it's still not back. And then in a few months you're like, oh, I'm really busy right now. I'll do it in 6 months. So if it's still not back in 6 months, and then you do go see someone and then they say, oh, it's fine. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, I need to remember to check on that in a few years because that's really not okay. And then suddenly it was 9 years and I was like, whoa, where did that time go? But so I think it's something that it is very common, but it's too easy to kind of write it off and just say, oh, I'll be fine. And so I'm hoping that by bringing this awareness to it, it's going to show people that, no, it's not okay. And the sooner you can get it taken care of, maybe with a few just tiny little tweaks, the sooner your body can get back to a place of health. And, at the end of the day, if you're not having a period, it means that your body does not feel it is in a safe enough place to be able to have a baby. So, for me, that it's kind of almost like a sticking point of like, oh, wow, do I really treat my body that badly that it's fearful of having a child? So, I think it's very common. And I think we need to kind of take this more seriously in general.
Yeah. And look, I don't work with elite athletes. I can't remember if I've ever worked with someone at that level, but I work with lots of women who go to the gym 3 or 4 days a week. And even at that level, there's a lot of my clients who are suffering with hypothalamic amenorrhea. HA is a much easier way of saying it. And so, I agree that it is really, really commonplace. I think partly, or one of the other issues with it is that because so many women are on birth control, particularly the pill, it can really mask it. So someone can continue to get their monthly bleed because that's not really you having a cycle and it's not really you ovulating. It's just because of the hormone medication that you're on that is then causing that bleed. And so it means that women come off the pill and then they don't get their period back and they don't know when that really would have stopped. Like it could have been years prior that it would have stopped if they weren't having something that was masking it. So I think that can also be problematic because you're just not getting that clear feedback on a monthly basis.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a lot of women who have reached out to me and said, oh, I wasn't having mine. And then, the doctor put me on the pill and I started again. And so, it's fine. And I'm saying, well, actually, it probably isn't fine, especially if you'd already lost it. And yes, you might be getting that bleed back again, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've actually fixed anything. Like you said, it's like masking it. So I think it's so good that we're kind of talking about this because, this is, I think, for most people been the biggest shocker of all. I think most people kind of assumed that, professional runners, there's some sacrifices you have to make and not everyone goes through it. But, people can kind of see with someone like me and be like, well, yeah, I guess, it's a side effect kind of thing of the training. But with most other people, if people think, oh, well, I'm on the pill, I'm fine, then, it just makes it more real to them that, wait, you're not necessarily exempt from this just because you're not training at a high level or because, your doctor put you on a pill and it's fine. So I guess it's all comes down to kind of push a little bit more and hopefully we can get the medical professionals to take this a little more seriously so that they can actually be knowledgeable about it when women do come to them.
And so you mentioned a couple of times in terms of Dr. Rinaldi, Nicola, how did you come across her book, No Period, Now What? Because this is how I found you. I've known Nicola now probably for the last year or so. I had her on my podcast. I recommend clients read her book and I get lots of clients off the back of Nicola really supporting my work and being in her Facebook group. But yeah, how did you come to discover the book?
I don't remember who exactly sent it to me, but someone who was going through a similar thing. I don't even remember how they found out that I was having amenorrhea, but I remember they sent me a link saying this book is really helpful, and so I thought, oh, okay, I'll check it out. And I opened the book, and I just felt like they were talking to me in everything. We say that all the time, like, oh, that blog post spoke to me or whatever, but this felt like everything that was going on in there. I was like, yes, exactly. Oh, finally. And it was so nice to feel that kind of someone else going through it saying, this is okay, this is normal, and kind of telling me that this is what you're going to experience, and then seeing other people going through it. And just that book became my Bible in so many ways. And it was actually the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge to say, okay, I'm going to stop running, because I'm not sure what I would have done had I not come across that book. I think I would have tried to back off the running and maybe done a little bit less. And yeah, that might have worked. But at the same time, I think I would have never had that confidence in what I was doing, that it was going to work. I would have had that little niggling in the back of my mind saying, are you sure this is enough? Are you sure this is enough? And whereas this, I can go about this recovery process and be confident that this is going to work. I just need to trust, and having the support and the forum is huge. So I think for me, it's been absolutely critical to this entire process.
And when did you actually find that book and start reading it?
I would say, I think it was around Christmas time. So yeah, 4 or 5 months ago. Okay. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I do remember reading a few chapters of it, and then I think I shut it down, and because I was thinking, oh, this is making me a bit too curious about this, and at the time I'd signed up to run to pace the London Marathon, the 2:28 group, and I had signed to run the Gold Coast Marathon in Australia, and they were paying for my flights and everything. So it was kind of one of those things of where I didn't want to poison my mind with thoughts that were going to pull me away from my training.
Yeah.
But then obviously I realized that it wasn't a case of poisoning my mind. It was a case of my mind was already kind of checked out, and I just needed to actually listen to it.
And have you, by going through that book, and you said having so many moments of oh, this is really speaking to me, or they're like reading a page out of my diary type stuff. Mm-hmm. Is there things that you've now noticed in terms of your health that are also going on? Because a lot of the women that I work with who are suffering with HA, it's not just that their period goes, there's lots of other issues that go alongside that. And I know you mentioned about sleep issues and insomnia, but in terms
mm-hmm.
of digestive stuff or mood or recurrent infections or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed some changes. I mean, I guess one of the biggest things is I would have thought, maybe we can talk about this separately in a minute. I would have thought that, going from someone who was lean and absolutely at the, peak of physical fitness, looking at photos of myself now, I'm kind of a bit surprised that that's how I looked. But I would have thought, going from that, I would have thought, oh God, I'm going to look horrible. I'm going to be fat, and I'm going to be ugly, and I'm going to whatever else. But actually, I feel a lot more confident in the way I look now, with the curves and with the womanly features, than I did before. So I guess that's one thing, is that, we think that we're going to end up obese and unhealthy and just looking, everyone's going to think, oh God, what happened to her? But actually I found it's kind of gone the other way, that I feel more womanly, and I feel like the weight has gone to the right areas, which it should. So if someone is in this same kind of situation, the weight is going to go where it needs to go, which is going to be, your belly, your boobs, and your hips. So yeah. It's kind of reassuring to know that it didn't happen in my head how I expected to go from, and I guess technically underweight to essentially obese in overnight, but it didn't happen like that. But in other things, I've noticed my nails before were very bendy. I could completely bend them over, and they don't do that anymore. I can't even count the amount of people who have told me I'm glowing, or my skin looks better, or I look fresher and younger, and all kinds of things. So that makes me question what I looked like before, but then mostly makes me feel confident that I'm doing the right thing, because there a few people, your mum and dad and stuff, are going to say you look good no matter what. But then hearing other people say it who maybe aren't as close to me, or tend to be more honest with their feedback, say it's really reassuring. And then I have actually been sleeping better. I mean, I know I mentioned to you before we came on the call that I wake up at 5, and that's kind of a typical thing, and especially with having a busy day like I do today, that's normal. But I will actually say I've been sleeping significantly better, and it's been so rewarding and liberating to gain some weight and not worry about, oh, should I be eating this? Is this good for me in my training? Is this really going to help my performance? And then, if I had something, let's say I went out for a burger and fries, oh, should I really have had a burger and a salad? Because the salad's got more nutrition. Like, it's been so liberating to just go out and enjoy it. So I feel like mentally more than anything, it's just been really enjoyable. And I feel like clearer in my mind. I feel happy, and there's been a lot of positive benefits from going through this.
Okay. And are there any negatives that come to mind in terms of the struggles with this? Is it mostly the weight, or there's been other stuff?
I would say it's mostly the weight. It's mostly kind of having that fear of people thinking you've let yourself go, or, for me, being able to kind of say, I'm okay with just being right now. And for me, the biggest struggle has been that competitor in me. When doctors all told me, because since this process, I've seen 3 or 4 different doctors, all the ones who I'd been working with, and each of them had said it's going to take 2 to 3 months. But being that competitor, I was like, well, if it's going to take most people 2 to 3, I'm going to do it in 6 weeks. And so, the fact that I completely stopped running, cold turkey. I ballooned up in weight. I ate everything I wanted to in sight, gained, close to 15 pounds in 6 weeks. Which is pretty impressive. And so I thought, it's going to happen really quick. So I have to admit the last week has been hard because I felt a bit disheartened. Body, what more do you want? I've relaxed. I've eaten more. I've stopped running. What more can I do, kind of thing. And even I went to acupuncture yesterday, and he said, you know what, I don't need to see you for a month because you're in such a good place. And so it's hard not to look at that and think, so what are you waiting for? But then, I know in the back of my mind that it just is time. In essence, my body's got to build up that uterine lining, and you can't rush that. So I guess it's just been the frustration of kind of, it's one of those situations where you know deep down that it's gonna work, but there's obviously those moments of doubt where you think, is this really worth it? Should I just give up? Kind of the same thing with training for a race. You always reach that moment of where you're like, is this really worth it? Should I just give up? Should I just quit? So, part of me thinks, oh, should I just go running? But then the other part of me is like, well, what if that one run, even though I know that's not the case, what if that one run was the thing that prevented you from getting it back? So it's kind of a constant battle in your head. But thankfully, those moments are fleeting, and with support and loved ones around you who remind you they love you no matter what, that really helps kind of with those moments.
And are there things that you're doing either in those moments or generally, like specific techniques? I know you mentioned acupuncture, but is there other stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, actually, the biggest one I found really helpful for those worst moments when I'm really kind of doubting it is I actually bought a journal. I went out to the store and I really took my time picking out one that spoke to me. And I writing letters, or writing essentially a diary to my future child, which really kind of keeps it in my mind as why I'm doing this. So I write to them kind of saying, I call them my little love, and I will write, I can't wait to meet you someday. I'm taking care of Penny, which is what I've decided to call my period. I'm looking after Penny right now. But once, Penny is happy, I can get ready to meet you and things like that. So I think that really helps me keep it as keep it real and keep in the forefront of my mind why I'm doing this, so that someday I can have a child and do the one thing I've always known I wanted to do, since I was a child. And so that keeps it very real. Rereading the chapters of that book really help. And I guess just doing other things that I enjoy. I tell people to write down a list of things that they enjoy other than running. It can be as simple as eating a bowl of cereal, or in my case, eating a bowl of ice cream. Or it can be, I went to a trampolining class because that sounded fun, or doing things that actually sound fun. Like I love the game Just Dance, which I know is made for 17-year-old girls, but I love it. So I will play that sometimes. So I think doing things that actually just make me happy are helping, but the biggest one is just the support, your loved ones, confiding in them and telling them that, I'm feeling a bit down, I'm feeling really big, and they'll say, no, you're not, like, you look great. And, just reassuring that's what helped the most. So not being afraid to talk to people.
And with the journaling, where you said you're writing a letter to your future child, is there any intention of then giving that to them when the time comes, or it's more just a way of thinking about it?
See, in my head, I feel like it's going to be a girl. And if it's a girl, I think I would. But I feel like a boy might be a little bit like, yeah, I don't want to read this. So I don't know. Maybe if it was a boy, maybe when they were much older and more mature. But I feel like a girl, I could give it to them at like age 15. But a guy, it would have to be like quite a lot later. So I don't know. I've thought about it. I definitely would like to. I guess I've written it in a state where I would pass it to them. And thinking back, I wish my mum would have done something like that, as she did have fertility issues as well. Like, I wish she would have done something so that I could know the kind of struggles she went through, because I feel like I'd appreciate what she did so much more, and kind of know how much she wanted it. But I think I probably will someday.
Okay, because as you were talking there, it was bringing to my mind. Have you come across a lady called Erin Brown?
No.
Okay, so I've had her on the podcast before, but she got pregnant. It was very unexpected, and it was a real transition for her. And she had a real kind of epiphany of wanting to change her life and kind of the way she treats her body and talks about her body. And so she wrote a book called Letters to Lola. And so her young girl was then called Lola. And they're just on all different aspects of life, with the hope that she will then give that to her at some point. I think she was saying that she's told her that she can read it at any point, and Lola's holding out until she's 13 or 14 or 15 or something so like cool. that. But she talks about and really personal stuff. So being a victim of sexual abuse, talks about drugs, talks about sex, talks about just life stuff. So yeah, when you were chatting, that came to mind.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know that, but I'll definitely check that out for sure. Thanks.
Yeah. You wrote a recent blog post entitled "Why Your Best Is Never Good Enough," which was fantastic. And I think it will really speak to a lot of what we're chatting about today and be helpful for people. So are you able to just talk about what that was about?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. A lot of my blog posts literally end up being on a Sunday morning. I'm like, what am I thinking about right now? And I literally don't even think. I just let my fingers start moving, and then it suddenly comes up, and I'm like, well, that was a bit rambly and didn't really make any sense, but oh well. And then I put it up, and people are like, oh, that was so amazing. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. But yeah, so I guess on that Sunday, I was kind of thinking about this weight gain and how my body has changed over this period. And it got me thinking about how we treat ourselves and how we are constantly comparing ourselves. We compare ourselves to others. And I host a podcast myself, the Running for Real podcast. And I talked to a sports psychologist who had said that we only, Dr. Brett McCabe was his name. We only compare ourselves to others against our weaknesses. We never look at our strengths and say, actually, I'm really good at this, or I'm stronger than most in that. We always just look at what we're not good at and compare ourselves to their strengths. And so that really kind of hit home. And he talked a lot about just how we also compare ourselves to our previous selves, and we're constantly trying to validate ourselves to basically get back to where we were, or look into the past. And it got me thinking about this transition right now and how my body has changed. I've definitely lost a lot of my muscle definition. I look completely different, and like I mentioned to you earlier, I would have thought I would have been fearful of that, thinking, oh, what, like, I've let myself go, I look horrible. But actually, as I mentioned, I feel a lot more confident. And I think people often think that, oh, if I could just get rid of those last 3 to 5 pounds, or if I could just look like this, I'd be happy. But we never are happy. And again, Dr. Brett McCabe said that we're not physically capable of being happy or content, because we would never grow. We would never keep striving to be better. So actually it's a good thing. But I thought about, when I was in the peak condition, when I ran that World Half Marathon race, I was as lean as I'd ever been. I did essentially have a six pack. I was, thinner than I'd ever been. You could see most of my muscles. My family and friends were constantly commenting to me saying, Tina, you're really getting a bit too thin. I'm not comfortable with this. And I, at the time, was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm bigger than most people I race against. And in my head, I kind of thought that. And I see now that, yeah, okay, when you compare me to someone who has a real issue with an eating disorder, I was a little bit bigger than them. But for the most part, I was just as thin as everyone else, but I couldn't see it. And I still thought, I would still go to the mirror a few times a day, look at my stomach in the mirror and think, oh God, if I could just get that proper six pack, then I'd be happy. But looking at it now, for most people, they think, oh, if I could just look how Tina looks, I'd be happy. But you wouldn't, because you never are. And me at that lean weight was leaner than I'd ever been before. So in the past, I would have said, oh, if I could just get to that weight, I'd be happy. And so it just made me think that we are always kind of striving for that perfection that we can never reach. You hear of people who have these big weight loss goals, and let's say their goal weight was 130 pounds, and they get to 130, but then they keep going, because it's not like, okay, I'm happy now, I'll just stay here. It's like, oh, I wonder what will happen with a little bit more. So it was just kind of like a thing to people to say, like, look, I've been at the leanest, I've been at what most would consider ideal, and actually I wasn't any more confident. In fact, I was still very poisoned by thoughts telling me I wasn't good enough and I could do more. Whereas now I'm learning to just kind of be who I am and remember that what's inside is what matters, and who I am is what matters, not the title I have as an elite runner or the way I look, which is the same for everyone else. We're not what we do, or we're not what we look like, but we are like the person that is inside, and the love and the personality that brings you to be who you are. So yeah, sorry, I rambled on a bit there.
No, it's a really great response. I mean, I chat a lot with clients about this stuff because things are always relative. And when you then reach that new point, you then have something else that you want to achieve. And it's quite interesting. I'll often chat with clients who are, say, heavier now or not as happy now in their body. And then they'll look back at a photo when they were 20 where they had a body that is more accepted by society's standards. But they'll comment that at that stage they were not happy at all. Yeah. And then they look at it now and they're like, oh, if only I could get back there, I'd be happier. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. Because you'd then be in that body and be thinking, but if I could just get a little bit further down and a little further down. And you get to that point where there is nothing that you can change that then makes you happier, because it's not about the aesthetic, it's about what's going on inside. And in just the person you had on the podcast saying that there is always that drive, because otherwise we wouldn't grow. And I agree with that, but I think there is a balancing act with that. Like you can be ambitious and you can be in a situation where you do want to improve, but that doesn't mean you have to resent or dislike or hate the current place that you're in.
Yes. No, I agree with you 100%. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's about finding the middle ground there of, you want to keep being better, but being better can be in different ways. Like for me, my being better is looking after my health and getting my health back to a place where it should be, rather than being better of, I want to be better with the way I look, or I want to be better with what I'm achieving. So yeah, I think you can definitely shift with that, but you can reach a place where you can be content with things.
Yeah. And so I want to get just a sense of how you're now spending your time, because you've gone, and maybe you can give us a little bit of context or juxtapose what was going on before. So what were you doing in terms of your training schedule? What was an average week looking like? And then we can look at what you're doing now in terms of how you're spending your time.
Yeah, this has been one of the most common questions, which I can totally see because it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so I was probably spending about I was running about 90 miles a week. So that's probably, I guess, around 15 hours of running. Plus I did 2 hours of cross training on either the elliptigo. I don't know if you know what one of those are. It's like an elliptical trainer that moves. It goes outside. But anyway, I have one of those. So I do mostly 2 hours of that a week. Plus, I had 2 hours of strength training that I would do with my strength training coach. And so, that was a lot of time spent on running. And that doesn't even include the travel to where I was going to run or travel to races and, the recovery aspects, the massage, the rehab, all the other stuff that goes along with it. So yeah, it's definitely cleared up a lot of time. But as I'm sure you probably know, when we find time, we quickly fill that time with other things.
Yep.
And suddenly wonder how we possibly could have fit all that stuff in before. And so I'm kind of in that state right now. And I will say that I'm quite proud of myself that I have been taking more time to relax and just be still. And I think so I'd say a decent chunk of that time has been replaced with that. I mean, before I was very, I don't want to say on edge, but, if I sat down in the evening or on a Sunday, if I sat down in the afternoon after an hour of TV, I'd be like, okay, well, I should clean the house or food prep or do something or somehow be productive. Whereas now I've been like, it's okay if I want to spend 3 to 4 hours just resting. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I've been learning to do that. I've also launched my own business, Running for Real, with, as I mentioned, the podcast. I'm creating a running community and getting some products ready to go for that. So I've been spending a lot of time getting that ready. And and I mean, in recent weeks, it's been a lot of interviews and kind of talks about this issue with people. So I've been helping a lot with that. But yeah, it's just mostly been filled up with other things that are kind of enriching my life in a different way. But the main way I've been going about things is if they make me happy and bring me joy, then I'm going to keep doing them. So like I mentioned about the TV, usually I wouldn't sit and watch TV. But if I can sit to myself and say, all right, am I enjoying watching this? The Great British Bake Off actually is one that I keep watching. Am I enjoying watching this? And if the answer is yes, then I'll keep doing it. Or if I'm, getting ready in the morning and there's, I put all the UK stations on, like Heart and Magic and stuff. And if they're playing good music that I'm enjoying, then I'll just, move around and kind of dance to it a little bit for longer. So kind of following the joy rather than just feeling like I have to be constantly go doing things. So it's somehow been filled up. Okay.
And will the business that you talked about before with the podcast and other bits, is that the hope that then becomes a full-time thing?
Yeah, I feel like my biggest strength is that I am able to relate to people, be real with people, and kind of help them feel good about themselves. So that's what I've been doing. I've created a community on Facebook, and anyone is welcome to join. And, got I think like 1,200 people in there right now, and just kind of like supporting them, their runners mostly, and just giving them any advice on, that I've learned over the years, and they're helping one another and just fostering that community. And then, as I mentioned, I'm launching marathon training, half marathon training programs from my husband, because so many people have asked about his training over the years, because he was so good at getting me peaked when it mattered. And then I'm working with my strength coach on a strength training program. So we're going to launch that soon. So yeah, I'd like this to ultimately become my job, that I am working on just helping other runners to achieve their potential in the same way that I did, without pushing too hard or too far, but in a safe and healthy way. But obviously that has to depend on whether I can get the right thing and get things that people actually want and need.
Okay. And look, the final question I want to ask is, what do you want to happen because of you sharing your story? Do you think that there things could be done differently in the field of running, or in an ideal world, where would changes be made, or what would changes look like if things progressed?
Well, when you first said that, my first thing is I want to be on Ellen DeGeneres. So if you can get me on Ellen DeGeneres, that's what I want. No, I just want it so that this isn't, I don't want any teenager girl or anyone to feel, even males, and I mean, we haven't even gone into this, but there's, even without the period side of things, there's still definite health detriments from males who are, going about those same habits that women are, with the over-exercise, the under-eating, all that kind of stuff. And so I want people to know that I don't want particularly teenage girls, that's what I kind of keep in my mind, to ever feel like something is wrong with them and they can't say anything, or be, you know, when I would be in a conversation and girls would be talking about their periods or their cramps, I would kind of hide off in the corner because I didn't want to be asked about it because I didn't know what to say. So I keep saying I'd love for it to be as common as an ear infection. So when the doctors all know all about it, and then when you say this isn't happening, or when they ask you what was the date of your last period and you say, I don't know, or 3 months ago, they say, all right, okay, let's get it taken care of. And they will start, they'll have like a checklist of things that the woman or the girl needs to go through to kind of try and regulate it and kind of work with them in a recovery process. So I'd love for it to be really common so that every doctor out there is educated about it and knows how to kind of treat it, so that it isn't kind of something you feel embarrassed about, but instead it's kind of like, okay, this is happening. Well, what can I do about it?
And I mean, you mentioned Ellen DeGeneres there. I don't know what I can do about that, but I also noticed, I think there was a Facebook video where you said that you would love to be able to chronicle this, and if some big publication could get involved, whether that, I can't remember what the examples you gave, but yeah, maybe just talk about that, because I don't know who listens to this podcast. Maybe it'll reach the right person.
Yes, well, I think People Magazine putting it out there is helping with that a little bit. But I'd love to, and I have kind of spoken to Runners World about this, which has been great. But as I mentioned, that as obviously is the case with the name, Runners World is for runners, whereas I'd love to get this out to the rest of the world, because as we've kind of discussed, this isn't just running, it isn't just exercise, it isn't just high level people of anything. It can be anyone and everything. So I'd love to get like a Vogue or a Cosmo or I'm trying to think of other publications, but one of the big companies that really gets out to worldwide. Obviously I'd love to be in one of the newspapers to kind of discuss it and just really get the word out, to share that. If I shared my journey of, it's been 8 weeks, I still haven't seen anything, it's a little bit disheartening, and kind of have something for people going through that process to read and be encouraged and know that they aren't the only ones going through it, and it is going to be worth it. And then hopefully as I get it back, and then hopefully I get pregnant and I have a baby, I can kind of say like, look, it's worth it, I promise you. So yeah, I'd love to kind of chronicle it over time, but it's going to be about getting to the right person. So yes, if anyone knows someone who would be able to help me with that, it really would be wonderful to kind of help other people across the board, not just in the running and fitness world.
Yeah. Okay, so before I wrap this up, where can people go to find out more information with you or to connect with you through social media? And I'll put all the links in the show notes, but you can just tell the listeners.
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned, my company is Running for Real, so you can pretty much find that anywhere. But everything you would need, I guess, is at my website, which is tinamuir.com. You can also type runningforreal.com and it will go straight to the website. But yeah, and I am Tina Muir across most channels. And I'd love to connect with you. So find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And like I mentioned, my blog is probably the biggest one. That's the one I update. That's where the podcasts go. That's where the blog posts go. There's a link to my Instagram at the bottom of the page. Everything is pretty much there. So I'd love if people would check it out and let me know your thoughts. And I hope I can give you a link to the Running for Real community. Facebook makes it a little more complicated with the groups aspect of things. Yeah. If someone wants to join that. So I guess the biggest one for that is to go to the show notes.
Okay, cool. Well, look, Tina, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your story and for making the decision that you have. I know from just reading the different comments on your blog posts, like how much has this helped people, and I'm hoping the same will come from today's episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and to anyone out there, I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.